So we're going to model this machine block, and we'll take a look at it here. And so the idea is that we're going to use a combination of extrusions and revolves. And so the idea is we're going to take this top view of the machine block and we'll copy that over, and then we will extrude the rectangle to a thickness of 1 inch. And then what we will do is we will also bring over the geometry for the slot and the hole geometry, and we'll use it to mark the locations for the holes, which we will take this view of and use revolves and 3D rotates to place them onto a square block that we will subtract from. So let's get started with that. We have our geometry created, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call that 3D, and I'm going to pull that out, and I'm going to set a color for that of cyan, and I'll make that current. I'm going to copy the object, and actually I'll copy all of this with it from here to some location here. I'm going to grab an isometric view, and like I said, I'll repeat this procedure once I have it modeled. And then to create the object, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change these 4 lines into a region. And so I'll say region, I'll select these 4 lines.
What's the difference between using region and join?
Not much.
Okay.
Yeah, a region has more of a solid fill to it, and you can do things like subtracting or Boolean operations. But from a standpoint of what we're going to do, by doing this as a region, it would make no difference versus if we joined it.
So did you type in region or you grab it somewhere?
I selected it right here.
Oh, okay.
Then what we'll do is we'll extrude this, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn on a toolbar for modeling rather than flip back and forth between the 3D icon. And I'm going to choose extrude. I'll select this shape, I'll hit enter, and I'll say 1.0. I will then join this, and so we'll use a different technique on this one. We'll say p-edit, and we'll select this line. Do you want to turn it into one? Yes. We'll say join. And so now when I hover over that, you'll see that it's one continuous shape. And I'll extrude that also. I'll say extrude this shape, enter, and we'll extrude that at a height of 1.0.
Did you have to do p-edit because it was within the other part?
Just a choice. You can do it one way or the other. I'm also going to turn on a toolbar to be able to see the shading. And so, let's see. Visual styles. And so what we'll do is we'll toggle back and forth between conceptual style and a wireframe. AutoCAD likes to work in wireframe more than conceptual styles because the graphics cards aren't really built for it, at least on this teaching computer. And what you'll notice is that they're both solid shapes. And so what I want to do is a Boolean operation called subtract. And so I'll say subtract, I'll select this, enter, and I'll subtract this shape and hit enter. And now we'll see if we revolve around it, we can use the view cube if I want to. It's hollow. If I hold the shift key and push the middle mouse wheel, you can see that that shape has been removed from it. So what I want to do next is to do the whole geometry. Now we can't do the whole geometry because the shapes are a little bit different. Now some of them we can do with extrude, and this one we can. If we look at the exercise, this we can extrude because it's basically a counterbore, and we can extrude the circular shape all the way through, and we can extrude this all the way through. But these two shapes we're going to revolve. So let's get to that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a copy or a move. I'm going to move this geometry from the bottom here of the rectangular shape to the top. And so what I'll say is move, and I'll select this and this. And I think I'm going to move all of them. So let's move them all. I'll hit enter, and I'll move it from the bottom to the top. And this is just a technique because I like to work from like I was drilling holes in this.
What command did you use for that?
I used move. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude this. And so again, I'll come in here, and like I said, I will repeat this process. Since we're making a video of it, I want to make it kind of short.
You're doing 3D stuff and you're able to do it in drawing and annotation, not in 3D modeling?
Correct, by just putting a toolbar on.
Oh, okay.
We could do it with a different workspace as well, but for right now we're just going to go and we're going to extrude this, and we're going to go take a look at our information here. And so this has a depth of 0.375 for the counterbore and all the way through for the hole. So extrude, select this, enter, and I'm going to go down a depth of minus 1.0. Looks like it went the wrong way. Let's see if I go 1.0 if I can get it to work that way. Yes. And I'll do the other one, 0.375. So again, I'll extrude this one. I'll point it down in that direction, 0.375.
So instead of doing a 2.0 or whatever the size of the block is, you went all the way down. So what command did you use?
So once I've extruded both of these shapes, again, we can visually check it. You'll see that they're both solid objects. What we want to do then is to subtract the geometries. And so if I say subtract, I'll select the large shape, hit enter, and then I can subtract each of these individual geometries. If I choose this big one first, you'll see I have a little island in the middle. And that's all right, depending on what we're creating, sometimes that will work for you, sometimes it won't. And then I'll do the same technique where I'll subtract, I'll select this, and I'll select this. And now we have our counterbore hole through the part. For the other two components, what we're going to do is to revolve them. And so to be able to do that, I'm going to copy over this front view. And I really only need the whole geometry and the center lines for that. So I'm going to turn on the center line layer, and I'm going to copy that. So I'll say copy. And what I want, I'll do WP, window polygon, and what I'll do is I'll select just the geometry that I want. And I'll select from here to here. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to create what's called a revolved surface. And to do that, I only need half of the object. And so I'll draw a line to close this off on both ends. And then I'll trim out the geometry in between. And I don't need this. I'll create a region out of the object. And then I'll revolve it. Revolve, select my shape, and then I define the axis by clicking on these 2 points. And when you revolve, you can revolve it up to 360 degrees, and so I'll say 360.
That's really cool.
To place this item, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a 3D rotate, and I'll place the center of the gizmo right here. I'll select the axis. I'll turn on my ortho to make sure that it goes within a 90-degree increment, and I'll start at this angle, and I'll bring that down 90 degrees, and I've rotated the object. To place it, this is the reason I brought this sketch geometry into the other object. It marks the location for that. And so this is two-dimensional geometry, and it's not going to interfere with the model. And so I use it to mark the location for it. And what I'll do is then I'll move this geometry from the center here to the center here, and my ortho's on. Once I've done that, I'm going to go to a wireframe so we can see it, and I'm going to subtract it. So I'm going to say subtract the object, select the larger shape, hit enter, and then the geometry. And if I shade it, you'll see it's still there. You'll notice that the sketch geometry is still there, so I can delete that out. I can get rid of this blue line later, but essentially, you know, I've got that part now set. The next thing I'm going to do is the same thing for the other hole, and so I'll do the same type of construction. I'll create a line from here, perpendicular, and then I'll trim it. And erase the parts that I don't need. So when you create these geometries, you have to have what's called a valid revolvable geometry. No figure eights, no crisscrossing, no loops. And so this is a profile shape that can be revolved. And I'll create a region out of that.
So does it always need a perfectly straight line?
No. No, the lines can be at different angles as long as it doesn't self-intersect, as long as it's not like a figure eight. And then we'll revolve this. Select the object to revolve and then the axes of rotation. And we'll go full 360. 3D rotate. Ortho. And then again, to place it, I left a marker. And so I'll just move it from the center to the center. And I can check it to make sure it's right. Looks good. And then I'll subtract it.
You had O snaps on, so the center showed up on both of those windows.
And then we'll verify it. And you can see I've got a little sketch geometry I want out of there. But yes, you definitely want to use your O snaps for that. And so that's how we do the basic modeling part of it. Some of the things we can do is we can look at this with other visual styles, you know, for example, like an X-ray where you can kind of see through it. But ideally, what a good technique would be to look at this would be to cut it. And so in order to cut this, what we want to do here is to use a slice command. And we're going to need a modify solids command. And so I'll bring a toolbar on for solids editing. So what we're going to do is we're going to slice this, and we weren't able to find the slice command on the solids editing toolbar. So I'm just going to type it in. I'm going to type in slice. I'm going to select the object to slice, and then I'm going to hit enter. And then what it wants is a plane or 3 points. And so I'm going to take it from the midpoint to the midpoint to the midpoint. And then what it says is keep both sides or pick a side. And I like to keep both sides, so I'll say B for both and hit enter. And you'll see it slices it. And then what I'll do is I'll use a 3D move command to separate them and pull it by this rocket so that they kind of stay within the planes. I'll hit escape. I'll clean up my sketch geometry. And then I'll put that onto a title block by switching over here and then going to a viewport layer and creating a viewport. And within that viewport, what I'll do is I'll set that view and the visual style for that. The UCS icon can get in the way, so I'll type UCS ICON and I'll turn it off. And that completes the modeling portion of this Machinist block.